Hello everybody, Dr. Rick Wallace dropping in on you. Hope everybody is having an unbelievable start to your week. Hope everything is going as planned. Even if not, remember, if you're still breathing, you're still in the fight. So don't give in, don't give up, don't quit. Look, I just did a video about how some men in broadcasting and with platforms, black men specifically, were responding to what Coach John Gruden said about a black man 11 years ago in an email. And I'm going to follow that up because there are some misconceptions about what I said that I want to clear up, but I'm not going to do it here because I don't want to dilute the message here. Today is quote unquote, I find it humorous actually, and I'm not being facetious, Columbus Day. And I thought this would be a good time. I've been invited several times, and I think I'm finally going to accept the invitation to actually sit down on a radio show and talk about critical race theory. But I thought today would be a good time to start a 3-part series on critical race theory. What it is, what it isn't, why it's such a big issue, and you know, all of that. But I thought this would be a good time just to kind of kick off the conversation. The first of a 3-part series on critical race theory. Today is going to be real casual, just kind of ease you into it, and we're going to get into some real things. I mean, because critical race theory is everything I talk about in different phases, and I'm going to explain what that is. See, what they want you to believe is critical race theory is simply a way for blacks to project or deflect or push the envelope as to why we're where we are at through blaming race, or it's an elaborate way to play the race card. And first and foremost, if you're responsible for something, you're responsible for something. It doesn't matter how many times a person says it. If you're responsible for it, you're responsible for it. You might not like it. So that's one of those things we are real good at deflecting and pushing the lens and the camera off of ourselves because we're uncomfortable with what we did. And the thing is, if you did it, you don't get to choose when somebody gets through talking about it. Now, what you can do is decide to move on, but you don't get to sit up and say when they can stop. You don't get to sit up and say when they've had enough, when they're okay, especially when you haven't really truly made amends. But this is what this is about. Here's what it's about. And before I move on, don't forget, show some love, show some support for the work we do at the Odyssey community, from the Research Center, Black Men Lead Rite of Passage program for young black males, Restoring Ghetto's Forgotten Daughters, a program that my wife runs, which is sort of the counter to Black Men Lead, where she's working with young black girls and young black women, as well as the Music is Life program. I believe that every young black person should learn how to play at least one instrument. Okay, now moving on. Look, critical race theory is actually coined as a process within the legal confines and constructs from the Constitution on down throughout the annals of institutional law that was coined by a law professor, Dr. Crenshaw. And its purpose is to explain process. So when you actually talk about critical race theory, first and foremost, it's not just about black history. It's not just about the history of the U.S. It's about the legality and the legal institutions as the institutionalization of racism and how racism plays a role. In other words, the very institutions that support the racial caste system in which we live and operate, and how it impacts each race, and specifically the relationships between white people and black people. And so when we talk about it, we see it not as a static statement, not as a noun, not as an expression of an idea, but in truth, it's a process of evolving an understanding of a system. And the hopes of it, from many perspectives, at least from my critical thought processes, I see critical race theory as the ultimate answer to the problem of racism in America. It's not about blaming white people. It's beyond that. It's not about sitting up and talking about, hey, look, hey, they did this to us and this time they did that to us. It examines that, but it examines it in a way that if you start to do, now check out what it says, critical race theory. So in other words, I'm examining through critical thought, through critical examination, through an interrogation, so to speak, of the system, how it negatively impacts my people, how it positively supports another group of people who are inherently and historically hostile to my people, and how that sets the stage for how we interact on a regular basis. So here we go. The reason why, prime example, and the reason that I decided to do it today, Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus was stuffed down our throats at an early age. It doesn't matter whether you were white, black, or whatever. He was stuffed down our throats. He was supposed to be the father of America. He's supposed to be the person who discovered America. We couldn't find out the bastard didn't even discover America, but that ain't the worst of it. He is literally, can be seen as the person who initiated an entire new global genocide against indigenous people, as Coach Greg Popovich put it in a recent interview about today. Christopher Columbus, a Columbus Day, a day that we celebrate by taking days off and making things inconvenient from others and a bunch of other stuff. We pay this unbelievable reverence to Christopher Columbus, and the truth of the matter is he's responsible for slaughtering numerous number of indigenous people, black people, people of African descent, taking slaves, doing so much. If you look at it, it was through Christopher Columbus' explorations that the indigenous people around the world came to be at risk. If he should be recognized for anything, it should be for the horror that he precipitated. It should be for all that he caused in the destruction of many indigenous people around the world. Not just what happened to blacks in America, not just what happened to Native Americans, not just but I'm talking about in the Caribbean and in so many other places that his ships landed. Now, especially in the Americas, you have to understand, we talk about the Americas, we're not simply talking about the United States. We're talking about both continents, all of the Caribbeans, the Virgin Islands, and all of the things that come as a part of that. He's accredited with discovering, and the truth of the matter is, his ship didn't land in all these motherfuckers. That's the first thing. But let me get back to what I'm saying. Let me get back on track. So this was pushed down our throats. Now, what you got to understand is this in of itself is a problem that we deal with in a white racial caste system. A part of the institutionalization of racism is the establishment of the superiority of the dominant group. So in other words, the Europeans are always put in as the saviors of humanity, the initiators of quote unquote civilization. All of these things, anything that we had something to do with is totally dismissed, totally misconstrued, totally reappropriated, and a number of other different things. The truth of the matter is, long before they came out of the Stone Age or the Ice Age or the Cave Age, or whatever you want to say in Europe, long before they even started bathing, we had created civilizations. This isn't me being hostile. This isn't me sitting up on some type of woke rant or rave. This is real truth. This is real truth. The truth tells me that it was people moving out of Africa known as Moors that went into Europe during a very bad time, when it was full of pestilence, when it was full of sicknesses, and they were dying at very early ages, and helped them to change their lifestyles to improve their health and extend their life expectancies. This is the truth. But that's the least of their worries. Most people believe that they're fighting critical race theory in the school solely because people are going to realize some of the horrific things that they've done to us in America. Yeah, that's part of it. Because you got to understand, at the same time that they're fighting critical race theory, there are literally books being printed that call African Americans are actually descendants of Africa or slaves, all of the above, calling them immigrants. There are books that say they voluntarily migrated here. There are books that say Native Americans voluntarily gave up part of their land so that the settlers would have somewhere to sit. There are all these things. So we're not talking about the Journey of Tears. We're not talking about the Trail of Tears. We're not talking about smallpox and blankets. What a lot of people don't realize is, yes, these people literally put smallpox virus in blankets, killing off a large part of the Native American population and a number of different tribes across the East and Central Plains, what we now know as the Midwest, and toward the East. That's not the only thing they did. These sick motherfuckers, excuse my language, killed off damn near all of the buffalo. Because, see, the buffalo stood not only as a major food supply, but that's where the vast majority of their clothing for the winter came. So they hit them with a smallpox virus, then starved them out, then froze them to death. That's how the sick minds are going. But that's not what critical race theory is such a threat. Critical race theory is a threat because of the very nature of its processes. See, critical race theory isn't about saying, here's a fact, let's complain about it. Critical race theory is about examining how it worked. Critical race theory is about looking into the dynamics of institutional racism to see how they're set up and how they operate, how they function. Guess what happens when people start doing it? Guess what happens if you start teaching critical race theory in schools? Now you got young children with brilliant minds examining a problem that needs a solution. How long before one of those brilliant kids come up with that solution? How long before some of the minds of some of these brilliant teachers who will teach it comes up with solutions? How long before they realize that some brilliant minds before them have already laid out the blueprint? What you got to understand is the last thing they want us doing is thinking critically. The last thing they want us to do is examine with cause and purpose what they have done. As long as we just want to whine about it, they'll act like it really bothers them, but they're not really concerned, because when you're whining, you're not executing or displaying or exhibiting power. When you start interrogating their behavior, when you start interrogating their system, when you start breaking down their system, there's a purpose behind it. See, you interrogate to get to the truth for the purpose. There's a cause behind the interrogation. There's a cause behind the critical thought. There's a cause behind the critical examination. What they do not want is for us to critically examine it. They don't want us to see it from a sociological perspective. They don't want us to examine it from a psychological perspective. They don't want us to examine it from a legal and political perspective. They don't want us to see it from a strategic perspective, because then we can start to decipher and counter engineer or reverse engineer what's been done to see and start to create systems of our own, to see and start to circumvent their systems, to see and start to operate strategically, to see and start to find out how we can, as individuals and as a collective, move through the system to benefit ourselves. See, they know more about us than we know about ourselves at this particular point. They know what we're capable of, because they've been robbing us of our ideas, robbing us of our inventions, robbing us of our identity for centuries. So they know who we are better than we do. And they know, and because they know who we are, they know what we're capable of. So when I talk about critical race theory, what I'm talking about is not a static word. It's not an idea. It's not a noun. It's not a person, place, or thing. It's more somewhat of a dynamic idea. It's a dynamic move. In other words, it's a verb. It's what's being done. It's action. It's something in motion. And that is what scares them, is that they're going to sit down and really pick this thing apart. They're going to start explaining it at a level that's beyond the anecdotal, superficial thing that we're getting. It's not going to simply be about convict leasing. It's going to be the damages that convict leasing done. It's going to be how convict leasing was then evolved and reconstructed and built into what we now know as mass incarceration, and how that is being used systematically along with the school system to create a permanent lower class, and that we need this lower class in order to substantiate and sustain the power class, the elite class, and how this racial caste system is set up. The very notion of race itself is going to be interrogated and examined. And so that's the thing that you're looking at. I mean, and the idea is, when you can really think critically, when you can get outside of the box, when you can sit up and you can start saying, look, what about this? And then you take that one idea, you can take that one idea that you've extracted from a much larger idea. It's just one idea. You've extracted it from a much larger idea. Well, there may be another 1,500 to 2,000 ideas within that larger idea, but you extract one, and then you break that one down in 1,000 different pieces to look at it and extract it. That's what happens when you start to think critically. That's what happens when you start to decide to get out of the box. That's what happens when you make up in your mind you're not going to be confined to the constructs of something that someone created for the purpose of constraining you. And that's what they are afraid of. Oh, get ready. I've got some more stuff I want to bring to you. Get ready, because there is a great deal of wealth and power in understanding this total dynamic of critical race theory and why people are so upset about it. This is game changing, and they don't want it. And it's been around for a while, but it's always been within the scope of legal system. But see, now it's leaked out into social understanding. It's leaked out into universal sociology, universal psychology. Is leaked out into the spectrum outside of just simply understanding the legal premises in weight of constitutional law, in weight of criminal law, and other areas. And now we're starting to see it play out in schools. We're seeing it play out in the corporate America. We're seeing it play out and be examined in so many different ways. And if it enters into the school system, now it's not as easy to indoctrinate. Now kids are asking and challenging. Now what used to be automatically accepted will have to stand on its own foundation of fact and proof. And if they start to do that, where kids are now saying, well, show me where that happened. Show me how that happened. Why is it this way instead of this way? Why is it that this group gets this and this group doesn't? Who gave them the right to take their land? Why haven't they ever been compensated completely and thoroughly for their land? Why haven't they been compensated legally and thoroughly for their labor that was taken from them for centuries? Why haven't they legally been given equal footing? Okay, now let's talk about, and it just goes on and on and on, and the minds are there at a very early age. But what happens is, when you open up the idea of someone thinking critically, you totally stifle the ability to control how they think. I'm going to get into it some more. It's so just like, I get excited just thinking about critical race theory and what it really means. And there are a bunch of different ways they're going to try to redefine it. There are a bunch of different ways that they're going to try to present it to make it seem like something bad. No, what it is the game changer for those who are willing to embrace it. But here's the thing I want to leave you with, and I hope that if I leave you with anything else, I leave you with this. Look, whether they get it in a school or not should not be an issue for us. We should apply the pressure. We should keep the pressure on, but that should not be the end game. Far too long, we have expected and trusted and waited on them to educate our children with what we should have been educating our children with. What am I saying? Whether they get it in the school or not, we should be teaching it to our children. We should be challenging our children. Our children should be able to put themselves in situations where they're thinking critically and thinking outside of the box. It should not be something that we're waiting on someone else to do for us. It's not for them to do. Malcolm told us a long time ago, only a fool expects his enemy to educate his child. Now, that is real simple. So what am I saying? This is something that we need to start building and integrating and creating systems for, so that by the time our children get around other people, one of the most powerful things that Sister Latava said on our last episode of The Teachers, where we were talking about self-sufficiency and being able to live on our own, and she was talking about what they're doing at the Hurricane campus and all of that. One of the things she stood up and said that was just unbelievable. She said that first and foremost, she can literally, and her children can literally remember the first time each one of them, and she has 8 kids, the first time each one of them saw a white person for the first time. That she literally did not allow her kids to be in environments where they were going to be negatively influenced around that. She said that each of her children, except the last 2, did not get cell phones until they graduated high school, which was her school. She homeschooled. She said that in order to graduate the homeschool, they had to start and run a business successfully for a year. The only reason the younger 2 got phones before they graduated, they were 16, they're twins, is because she was moving out of the country and she was taking the 3 younger kids with her, and she wanted them to have unseparated, uninterrupted connectivity with their father. Now, her and her husband divorced some time ago, but they have this unbelievable relationship. Like I say, Dr. Blanchard and I have known her for a while, so they have this unbelievable relationship, and they are both heavily involved in their children's life, and she did not want them at one point to be where they could not talk to their dad. So that they got their phones at 16 because that's when they left the country. But another thing she said, before she ever exposed them to anything that was outside of the value system she was creating for them, she made sure that they knew who they were. So they were well able to talk and speak up for themselves before they were ever exposed to anything outside of the cultural realm and beliefs and state of mind and existence and identity of self. And that is something we have a responsibility to do. So on that note, look, I'm gonna get ready to get off of here. If you haven't watched that episode of The Teachers with myself, Dr. Blanchard, and Sister Latava, you definitely need to check that out. Also, don't forget, show some love, support the work we're doing. I got to get out. I got to grab stuff. Baby's been hitting me up, talking about what we need. So I got to get out of here and grab it and get to the house. I appreciate you guys. I love all you guys. I'm out. Peace.